an interesting exchange happened on CNN between Jim Acosta and Chad Wolf, who used to be Donald Trump's, or at one point he was the acting Secretary of Homeland Security under Donald Trump. And they get into a discussion about the election and about election fraud and if it was stolen or not. And so many different things in this exchange happened that I kind of want to break down. There's larger points to make around it. So I'll just show it to you and kind of stop it throughout to break it down.
Fraud. I think there's a number of election irregularities, illegalities, and fraud. And I think that's been widely reported.
But enough
on both
to
the right on the left.
But enough to alter the outcome.
So the first thing you'll notice this Chad Wolf guy keep going back to is I think there's a number of irregularities and fraud. I think there's many instances of fraud, whatever. And I'll probably further discuss this in a bit, but that is a very, very dishonest framing of an answer to a question that's pretty obvious, which is, do you think there was wide-scale voter fraud? Do you think there was the election was stolen? And so why is it important to identify the difference between how he's answering it and what the actual question is? Well, because in every election, always, forever, throughout history, always, every single time, there was some instances of fraud. In a country of 300 plus million people, you are going to have someone or a handful of people attempt, sometimes accidentally, and then even often purposefully, to do some form of election fraud. It's just going to happen. It is. That has no relation to, do you think the election was stolen? Because 5, 10, 100 people trying to go vote twice because they love a candidate so much, or trying to mail in a ballot and also vote in person, and whatever it is, that has zero chance of swaying a national election, right? So those cases should be prosecuted. Those people should be held accountable. You shouldn't do that in a democracy. But it literally, a small amount of fraud is not a threat to our democratic process, because it happens every single election, and it's at such low levels that it couldn't possibly have any effect over the results. And so him going back to, well, there's a handful, or there's a numerous cases of election irregularities is silly. It's nonsense, because just by the very nature of millions of people voting, you're going to have some instance where someone does something wrong or there's some irregularity. But you have to provide evidence if you're wanting to pretend the election was stolen, or there should be any doubt whatsoever about the results, that this election had so much that the actual results could be different than what they are, which is a very different question.
Of the 2020 election? Are you an election denier?
I would say any type of fraud, any type of election fraud. No, this is important. Any type of, I don't want to just bypass, was it a little or is it a lot? Right? Any election fraud should be addressed. And I don't think we would say just, hey, there's...
So, see, this is why I wanted to show this clip. There's so much in so little time about this that is important. And it's almost like someone like this guy wants to hold on to the belief, or at least for self-promotion purposes among a particular audience. I don't know. But for some reason, he has to hold on to the idea that there was some reason this election wasn't legitimate. But when it's been analyzed time and time again because of how many claims there are, this was one of the best, most secure elections we've had. And we do our elections pretty good already in the United States compared to other countries and compared to history. So it was very secure. And so then you can tell how dishonest it is to continue saying, well, any amount of fraud should be addressed. Of course it should. And it does get addressed. People do get held accountable by our criminal justice system for any form of election fraud. Yes, so those should be investigated. That is so different than casting doubt on the entire election. You have to provide evidence before you can start making claims like the election was iffy. You have to provide evidence about some wide-scale nature of it that could have affected the election results.
There's a little fraud, so that's okay.
Who won the
at the end of the day?
No one's saying a little fraud's that's okay. We're saying it couldn't have affected the results. Yes, the individual should still be held accountable.
Chad, I think that's very, very important.
Who won the 2020 election?
Obviously, Joe Biden is president.
No.
I mean, there is no. I just answered your question.
No, but he is the president. Obviously,
he is the president.
I've seen folks from Trump world parse this out and say, okay, Joe Biden is president. We know that. Okay, that is a matter of fact. Do you believe that he won that election fair and square?
I believe that. I just answered the question first. Let me answer it in two parts. One, Joe Biden is president. Two, a number of irregularities, illegalities, and fraud.
So he just perfectly did something that is an example of you don't have to be lying in a given moment to be very dishonest and very manipulative without telling direct lies. So what this guy just did is he said, I know two things. Number one, the second thing was there was a number of irregularities. Okay. Number one, Joe Biden is president. And number two, there was a number of irregularities, fraud, etc. in this election. Both of those statements are true. Biden is president, and just like every other election throughout history, there were some instances of fraud, and those people should be held accountable. That is a masterclass in how to be dishonest through framing or through selective, answering of the question, where you don't actually lie with the words that are coming out of your mouth, but by what you choose to focus on and the magnitude that you're giving to the things that you're saying. You are being just as dishonest as a liar would be. You've now risen to the level of being a liar because you're trying to say to an audience, don't trust in this election by saying two facts that shouldn't give anybody that conclusion. Joe Biden's president and there was irregularities. Just the simple fact of there being irregularities should not make you distrust the election process because again, millions of people involved in a democratic process, some people are going to try to do wrong things. You have to prove that it was by some, measure, wide scale and could have affected the election results. That's very fascinating watching him do that because he's smart enough to know that he can't just make outright false claims necessarily, but he can make a couple true claims that when you put them together and whenever you put them within the context of a question that was about if the election was stolen or if you're denying the results of the election, are just as dishonest as telling a blatant lie.
Occurred during 2020.
But not sufficient to throw...
Again, I don't have all of that evidence. I think there's been a number of reporting...
You sound like a conspiracy...
So interesting. Okay, we'll stop it there. But again, it was just a minute, bunch of things that have a lot of takeaways from it. So that's another great way to cast doubt without completely, without keeping some sort of plausible deniability where he says, I don't know, not sure. I don't have all of the information that would allow me to know if it was completely secure or if there was enough fraud to swing the election results. It's genius because then you put out a bunch of claims that would make someone doubt the election, but then say, but I don't know, I'm not saying one way or another. I don't know. Who knows? And within the context of talking about an election, the importance of integrity of our democratic process and of trust in that process, it is very damaging to just cast doubt and then walk away and say, I don't know. Very damaging because the only thing that holds together a democratic society like ours, again, I understand our government is a democratic republic, but we use democratic processes so that we have representation with our government of our own voices. Within a system like that, the only thing that holds it together is the belief in it operating, healthily, in it operating properly. The second that the country doesn't believe that they're able to go use their voice through voting and it mattering and it being heard and it being legitimate, you lose the ability to have an effective system. You lose the ability to have some sort of social cohesion. And that's super scary. And that's why we have to push back so aggressively against claims like the one this guy was making and against kind of these anti-democratic actions by so many people.